You are 2 miles above the Amazon rainforest, strapped into a seat, and the plane around you no longer exists. The wing is gone. The roof is gone. The people who were beside you a moment ago are gone. There is only the seat, the wind screaming past your ears, and the green canopy far below, spinning slowly up to meet you. You are 17 years old. And in a few seconds, you are going to hit the jungle. This is not a scene from a film. On Christmas Eve of 1971, this happened to a real girl. Her name was Julianne. And the reason she lived is not the reason you would guess. It was not luck. It was something her father had told her, almost in passing years before. 4 ordinary words that would carry her out of the deadliest forest on Earth. Most people, if they somehow survived that fall, would die in the days that followed. Not from the injuries. From a single wrong decision made in the first hour on the ground. Julianne did not make that decision, and to understand why, you have to understand who she was before the sky opened up. Julianne Capek was born in Lima, Peru in 1954, the only child of 2 German zoologists. Her parents did not study the rainforest from a distance. They lived inside it. When Julianne was 14, they left the city and built a research station deep in the Amazon called Panguana. And so this teenage girl grew up in a place most people would call a nightmare. She learned the sounds of the forest. She learned which animals to fear and which to ignore. She learned, as she later put it, that nothing is ever really safe, not even the solid ground you walk on. She had no idea how literally true that would become. On the 24th of December, 1971, Julianne and her mother, Maria, boarded a flight from Lima. They were traveling to meet Julianne's father for Christmas. The flight was Lanza Flight 508. There were 92 people aboard. The plane was a Lockheed Electra, and it flew directly into a violent thunderstorm. For a while it was just turbulence, bags falling, people gripping their armrests. And then Julianne saw it. A blinding flash of light on the wing, on the outer engine to the left. Lightning had struck the plane. Beside her, her mother said something very calm and very quiet. "That is the end. It's all over." Those were the last words Julianne would ever hear her mother say. The plane did not simply fall. It came apart in the sky. One moment Julianne was in a cabin full of screaming passengers. The next, the noise vanished, and she was outside the plane, still strapped into her row of seats, spinning through open air 2 miles above the ground. She was upside down. She could see the forest below her, turning, she said, like a green spiral, and then she blacked out. Now stop and think about what should have happened next. A person falling from 10,000 feet does not survive. And yet Julianne did. Experts have argued about it ever since, and the best explanation is a chain of small mercies. She was strapped into a set of 3 seats still bolted together, and that row may have spun like the blades of a helicopter, catching the air and slowing her. She fell through the powerful updraft of the thunderstorm itself, which pushed back against her. And where she finally came down, the jungle canopy was thick, a tangle of vines and leaves that broke her fall like an enormous net. Every one of those things had to happen, and every one of them did. She woke up the next day, alone, still strapped into her seat, lying on the floor of the rainforest. The world had gone silent except for the drip of water and the calls of birds. She had a broken collarbone, a deep gash in one leg. Her eye was swollen almost shut. Her glasses were gone, and she could barely see. And her mother was nowhere. Of the 92 people on that plane, Julianne Capek was the only one who would live. 91 others were gone, including Maria. Here is where most survivors would have died. Because the instinct, when you are hurt and alone and terrified in the middle of nowhere, is to stay put. To sit by the wreckage. To wait for someone to come. It feels safe. It feels logical. And in that jungle, it is a death sentence. Rescue planes did fly overhead in the days that followed. Julianne could hear them. But the canopy of the Amazon is so dense that from above, the forest floor is completely invisible. No one searching from the sky could ever have seen her. If she had waited, she would have simply waited until she died. But she didn't wait, because somewhere in her memory was her father's voice. He had once told her that if she was ever lost in the jungle and found running water, she should follow it downstream. Moving water flows into streams. Streams flow into rivers. And rivers, eventually, are where people are. It was such a small piece of advice. The kind of thing a parent says and a child half forgets. But Julianne remembered it. And she staked her life on it. She found a small trickle of water first. She followed it. It led to a wider stream. And she made a choice that sounds insane until you understand it. Rather than fight through the tangled undergrowth on the banks, where snakes and biting insects and predators waited, she walked directly in the water itself, wading down the middle of the creek. The open channel was safer than the shore. Her father's advice was now the only map she had. For 11 days, this half-blind, injured 17-year-old girl walked and waded and swam through one of the most dangerous environments on the planet. Her only food was a bag of candy she had found in the wreckage, which she rationed until it was gone. The days were brutally hot and wet, with rain falling again and again. The nights were cold, and she had nothing but a thin sleeveless dress. Insects laid eggs in the open wound on her arm, and she could feel the maggots growing beneath her skin. At one point she passed the bodies of other passengers who had also fallen. She forced herself to keep going. And notice what did not happen. The jungle, the thing everyone fears, largely left her alone. No jaguar took her. No snake struck. The animals, perhaps frightened by the crash, perhaps simply uninterested in a quiet, slow, wounded creature moving through their world, kept their distance. The forest she had been taught to respect since she was a child did not turn out to be her enemy. Her own panic could have been. But she had been raised never to panic in that place. On the 11th day, exhausted and near the end of her strength, she saw something that did not belong to the forest. A boat. A small canoe tied at the edge of the water, and beyond it, a shelter. It was a camp used by local lumber workers. There was no one there. She crawled inside and waited. Hours later, the men returned, and they found a starving, sunburned, barely seeing girl who had fallen out of the sky and walked out of the deepest jungle alone. They tended her wounds as best they knew how, put her in the canoe, and carried her 11 hours downriver to a place where she could finally be flown to a hospital. She had survived the fall that killed 91 people. And then she had survived the 11 days that would have killed almost anyone else. So what does this story leave you with? It is tempting to call it a miracle, and in part it was. Julianne herself could never fully explain why she was the one who lived, and the question haunted her for the rest of her life. But look closely at what actually carried her out of that forest. It was not superhuman strength. It was not luck alone. It was knowledge, planted quietly years before she ever needed it. A father's offhand advice about following water downstream. A childhood spent learning that the jungle is not evil, only indifferent. The calm that comes from having been somewhere frightening long enough to stop being ruled by fear. Everything that saved Julianne, she was given before the crash. The lesson was already inside her when the sky broke open. And that is the part worth carrying with you. The things people teach you in ordinary moments, the small advice you barely listen to, the skills you pick up without knowing why, these are not wasted. One day, without warning, the plane comes apart. And what you reach for in that moment is whatever someone took the time to put there first. Julianne lived. She grew up to become a biologist, like her parents. She went back, again and again, to the rainforest that nearly killed her and then, in her own words, gave her life back. The forest that swallowed a plane full of people let one girl walk out. Not because she was stronger than the rest, but because when the ground beneath her disappeared, she already knew which way the water flowed.